In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Greetings of peace to all of you. Thank you for joining us this lovely Tuesday evening. My name is Lina Salim. I am representing the Center for Interfaith Understanding, CIFU, and also currently serving as the Southeast Asian Fellow under the Qaisid King Abdullah ibn Abdul Aziz Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue Fellows Program. I will be the moderator for our special lecture tonight in commemoration of the International Day of Peace. The UN General Assembly has declared the International Day of Peace, which falls on 21st September, as a day devoted to strengthening the ideals of peace through observing 24 hours of non-violence and ceasefire. This year's theme is Recovering Better for an Equitable and Sustainable World. The pandemic that we are experiencing today has been accompanied by a surge in stigma, discrimination, and hatred, which only cost more lives instead of saving them. The virus attacks all without caring and where we are from or what we believe in. Confronting this common enemy of humankind, we must be reminded that we are not each other's enemy. To be able to recover from the devastation of the pandemic, we must make peace with one another. As we heal from the COVID-19 pandemic, we are inspired to think creatively and collectively about how to help everyone recover better, how to build resilience, and how to transform our world into one that is more equal, more just, equitable, inclusive, sustainable place for everyone. But first, let us observe a minute of silence in honor of all those who have died a violent death or live with the result of violent actions, and those who have been robbed of their peace and basic rights today. Let us also reflect upon the privileges that we may have enjoyed being in the peaceful environments that we each are in. Let us begin our one moment of silence. All right, so let us now continue and allow me to now introduce to you our speaker for tonight. Dr. Min Lip Dal is a research fellow for the study of love in religion at Regent's Park College, Oxford. His research focuses on comparative mysticism in Islam and Christianity, with special interest in love mysticism in Sufism and the contribution of women mystics in both tradition and in both faith traditions. In the Love in Religion project, he focuses on the mysticism of love in its medieval and modern forms. His book, A Sufi and a Friar, A Mystical Encounter of Two Men of God in the Abode of Islam, was published by Sunny Press in 2017. He is working on a new monograph, Women Sufis, Models of Sanctity and Erudition. The topic for tonight's lecture is Radical Love, a Premise for Interreligious Relations. The concept of love is found in most, if not all, religious and faith traditions. In a very general sense, love can be expressed in two ways, the vertical and the horizontal connection. Vertical refers to the love between a creator and a creation, and the horizontal between the creations of God. Yet, love can be so overrated in today's time. People throw words of love and yet fail to truly express it. And sometimes, some expression of love doesn't need any words at all. In the Islamic tradition, love can be understood in the way God expresses love to his creations, and the way his creation, in turn, showcases their love, desire, and longing towards the divine entity. The notion of divine love has presented itself in the Muslim philosophical, theological, and mystical discourses, albeit in various and at times paradoxical dimensions throughout Muslim intellectual history. The philosophers such as Ibn Sina saw God as pure intellect, pure good, and pure love. And these attributes are part of his divine essence that emanates to other beings. Some of the mutakallimuns may object such expression of love relationship and understands the expression of love by the divine towards his creation is through promises of rewards and elevation of the righteous to the highest ranks, while love of the believers is expressed through obedience and worship. And we have the Sufistic traditions, which asserts the importance of establishing a spiritual and loving relationship between the divine and humankind. It is notable to speak of Rabi'a Adawiyya, who is one of the first mystics who was instrumental in the development of the theology of love. It was Rabi'a who, by asserting that love comes from eternity and embraces the whole creation, established a strong foundation for a mutual love relationship between the divine reality and the human reality. She taught that people should not worship God out of fear of hell and promises of paradise, but they should worship God out of love, and wrote passionate poems about the desire to be joined to God, permanently influencing the development and the nature of Sufism. If I can share her words, my heart is filled with love of God and has no place in it for hate. And yet, hatred and violence have colored the history of many religious communities. What went wrong? Was it ever wrong? How can love be expressed so deeply in divine thoughts, and yet the opposite is shown towards the environment, towards the people who have been othered? Let us now join Dr. Min Lip in his lecture as he discusses how the concept of love, not just love, but radical love, can be a tool of peace building in today's time. The mic is now yours, Dr. Min Lip.
Thank you very much. Many thanks to the organizers for their invitation, and above all, to the audience, without whom there will be no event. Thanks for tuning in. In this short presentation, I propose to let the prolific Christian thinker Soren Kierkegaard and Jalaluddin Rumi to guide us on the path of radical love. I will speak only of Islam and Christianity, but the discussion, after all, is open to all faith tradition. It is worth noticing that our devout practices, pious lifestyle, strong commitment to faith must be understood in the light of the strength or the vitality of religious tradition and the long history of interreligious conflict and violence. At the center is the tension between identity, faith commitment on the one hand, and openness to or love for the religious other, the stranger on the other. Does radical love help us find a correct relationship between openness to others and our own faith commitment? Let us keep in mind that the context of our lives determine our ethical existence. I mean, the manner in which our moral experience makes our finitude indisputable. André Malraux will call that the human condition. In addition, the diversity of our political and religious beliefs add to the difficulty of crafting a path to peaceful coexistence. Nonetheless, we can still learn from those who have dedicated most of their lives to probe the nature of divine love, divine and human love. Professor Fides, let me get, what is my, Let me get this in a minute.
Dr. Min Lip, if you can share your presentation slide, that would be helpful.
Is it out? I just did. Is it there?
It is not yet up.
Oh, what is up on my? Hold on. Yes. Hold on. Let me end this show. Oh, hold on. 1 minute. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
All right, great.
Can you put it in the presentation mode?
Is it in presentation mode now?
No, not yet. So you go to the icon. Oh, not that one.
That
Yes,
one,
that
right?
one. Yes, that one. Yep.
Is it good?
Yes, this
Yeah.
is good. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I was going to get at. All right, so I was trying to get to this particular one. Right. Professor Fides Wright, what grounds are there for thinking that love in religious consciousness and practice today is the ultimate reality of the universe? The underlying conviction is that to understand the phenomenon of love is a discovery of the nature and activity of God in the world. Jalaluddin Rumi in his Masnavi write on behalf of God, were it not for the ocean of pure love, what reason would I have to forge the heavens? For Rumi, love is the main reason for creation. He teaches us to read the mystical sign inscribed upon the human breast by the fingers of God. This is the language of love, an orientation and attitude which, for Rumi, defines the very essence of righteousness and true religion. It does not matter if the seeker of truth approaches truth through law, through skepticism, or even blasphemy, so long as the seeker turns to face the truth of the sun and is attuned to the meaning of love. In both Christianity and Islam, human desire and love take their source in divine love. Kierkegaard offers a charming metaphor of this reality. As the quiet lake is fed deep down by the flow of hidden springs, which no eye sees, so a human being's love is grounded still more deeply in God's love. If there were no spring at the bottom, if God were not love, then there would be neither a little lake nor a human love. As the still waters begin obscurely in the deep spring, so human love mysteriously begins in God's love. Hafez al-Shirazi gives us the Islamic version of what Kierkegaard was trying to say. He writes, "The court of love is the palace of the spirits, since it was there in pre-eternity that love branded the spirit with the mark of Allah's too. Am I not your Lord?" In the mystical dimension of Islam and Christianity, particularly in Islam, Sufi masters like Mansur al-Khalaj, Ahmed al-Ghazali, Hafez al-Shirazi have written eloquently about love and God, particularly God as a lover, God as loving, and God as the beloved. For them, love is the most reliable moral compass. According to Halaj, love pertains to the very essence of the divine. Ahmed al-Ghazali, the brother of Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, equates love with divine essence. Rumi seems to me the most eloquent in this matter. For him, love, the astrolabe of God's mystery and the animating force of creation, He posits love as the primal element of creation, a vital force that stirs the universe and creates all that exists. Rumi continues, the force of love, even if initially as a worldly desire, can lead us toward the transcendence, beloved. Love transcends question of faith and infidelity. Love, I think this is the heart of this code. Love is the kernel contained within the shell of the dichotomy of blasphemy and religion. Love grows in the garden of human perfection and exalts the earthly body above the seven heavens. In the realm of free will and predestination, divine wisdom made human beings lovers of one another. Therefore, for those who are committed to a faith tradition, to a peaceful resolution of our political and theological differences, the task, in my view, is an attempt to love as God loves or to love as God commands us to love. I am reminded of two well-known hadith Qudsi, that means hadith in which God speaks. First, God speaks, the heaven and the earth contain me not, but the heart of my faithful contains me. And the second, this is just a piece of it, when I, God, love my servant, I become the hearing by which my servant hears, the sight by which my servant sees, the hands by which my servant grasps, and the foot by which my servant walks. In that sense, love is the core expression of the friends of God, the wali or the saint. Here, God makes a striking statement. When God loves God's servant, the servant is absolutely transformed and acts as God will act and sees as God will see. It will be a mistake to think that Rumi, Hallaj, Hafez, or Al-Ghazali are making an abstract or purely mystical discourse. Allow me a detour at this point. Let me call upon Emmanuel Levinas and Paul Ricoeur to make my point clear. Levinas and Ricoeur are very concerned with care due to the stranger, attention and responsibility to the face of the other. Levinas's obsession is the face of the other, and he believes every one of us has an infinite responsibility to and for the other. He insists on asymmetrical and non-reciprocal relation to the other. Levinas here is faithful to the fundamental experience that grasps us when we feel the vulnerability of the face of the other. Such nakedness or vulnerability holds us hostage in the sense that, in spite of ourselves, we are summoned to be responsible to the other. In which way the face of the other holds us hostage demands our attention. Ricoeur, in a conversation with Levinas, writes, in his book, Oneself as Another, Ricoeur gives us a sublime image of the face of the other and how it holds us hostage. He writes, when the face of the other rises itself before me, above me, it is not an appearance that I can include within the sphere of my own representations. To be sure, the other appears. His face makes him appear, or her. But the face is not a spectacle, it is a voice. This voice tells me, thou shalt not kill. Each face is a Sinai that prohibits murder. The face of the other, of the neighbor, of the stranger prohibits murder. The face of the other demands radical love. Love as divine commitment, a divine command, according to Kierkegaard. Note the title of Ricoeur's book, Oneself as Another, Soi-même comme un autre. Kierkegaard calls it Christian love. Kierkegaard's voluminous and dense book, Works of Love, is an attempt to reiterate the boundaries between preferential love and what he called and Christian love, between friendship and erotic love on the one hand, and the love of a neighbor on the other. That's what he called unpreferential love or Christian love. For the Danish theologian, love is indescribable. Since God is love in Christian tradition, and God is unfathomable, thus love is unfathomable. Kierkegaard is concerned with the manifestations of love in Christian life, not love per se. Is love inscrutable? It would seem that Ibn Arabi agrees. He writes in his book that Michael Sells translated like The Station of the Desire, Tarjuman al-Ashwaq. Amazing. How could it be that the one pierced through the heart of love, through the heart by love, had any reminder of self to be bewildered? Love's character is to be all-consuming. It numbs the senses, drives away intellect, astonishes the thought, and sends off the one in love with the others who are gone. What interests me in Kierkegaard is his understanding of the biblical command to love one's neighbor as oneself. This Christian love, this non-preferential love, focuses on the moral value and praiseworthiness of neighborly love. By the way, I'll be glad to entertain criticism of Kierkegaard's position in question and answer. Kierkegaard clearly affirms the moral superiority of unpreferential love and approves preferential love on one condition, that preferential love serves as an instance of neighborly love. Neighborly love is the undiscriminating kind of love that Kierkegaard associates with Jesus' command to love one's neighbor. However, he sees unpreferential love, radical love, we can call it, non-passionate love, as more suitable to answer the divine command to love one's neighbor. His argument, perhaps the most striking argument in the book, is that unpreferential love is commanded by God. And he believes that solely by virtue of that fact, it differs from other forms of passionate love. But to the question, how can love, which is typically understood to be organic and spontaneous, be commended and yet remain love? Here, Kierkegaard has in mind Immanuel Kant, for whom love cannot be commended. No one can order you to love. In this instance, Martin Luther King will agree with Kant when he says, the law can stop a white person from lynching a black person, but the law cannot command or make a white person love a black person or any other situation. Kierkegaard's answer to this conundrum of a command to love is as follows. He writes, you shall love only when it is a duty to love. Only then is love eternally secure against every change, eternally made free in blessed independence, eternally happy, secure against despair. Kierkegaard has written a lot on despair, so he knows what he's talking about. Only when it is a duty to love, only then is love eternally secure. Then to the question, who is my neighbor? Kierkegaard, as a committed Christian thinker, refers to the parable of the Samaritan. We might talk about it for those who don't know it. The Samaritan in the parable shows uncalculating generosity to a wounded stranger. It is when Christian love is measured against these moral standards that ordinary kind of human love are found wanting, according to Kierkegaard. According to him, then, the Samaritan action is what a neighbor does. Kierkegaard insists it is, in fact, Christian love which discovers and knows that one's neighbor exists and that it is one and the same thing. Everyone is one's neighbor. If it were not a duty to love, then there would be no concept of neighbor at all. But only when one loves his neighbor, only then is the selfishness of preferential love rooted out and the equality of the eternal preserved. He believes that love for neighbor, that is for all men, women, and children, is selfless love. And though commanded, is made free, since it is no way visceral or directly connected to the lover, as in self-love. He called preferential love also self-love. However, at a distance, one's neighbor is only a fragment of the imagination. In my view, if we take Kierkegaard's faith-based Christian approach seriously, radical love is a divine command. And God is not only the mediator between myself and my neighbor, but God commands the love for my neighbor. The neighbor is unconditionally every person we meet, not the one we choose, not the one we tolerate, not the one we agree with. Kierkegaard is clear on this point, and he would like to say, and this line almost sums up everything Kierkegaard is trying to articulate. In loving a neighbor or being a neighbor, we are all unconditionally like each other. This, in my view, is an invaluable advice for those engaged in interfaith relations. I would like now to give the last word to my good friend, Louis Armstrong.
Some of you young folks been saying to me, hey, Pops, what you mean, what a wonderful world? How about all them wars all over the place? You call them wonderful? And how about hunger and pollution? They ain't so wonderful either. How about listening to old Pops for a minute? Seems to me it ain't the world that's so bad, but what we are doing to it. And all I'm saying is see what a wonderful world it would be if only we'd give it a chance. Love, baby, love. That's the secret. Yeah. If lots more of us loved each other, we'd solve lots more problems. And man, this world would be a pleasure. That's why old Pops keeps saying, I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them blue for me and you. And I think to myself, What a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying how they do. They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I never knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful ooh, yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much, Dr. Minlip, for such an insightful and I would say very inspirational words that you have shared with us. And the song at the end really hits the spot. It really makes the concepts that you have brought in the lecture alive, and it makes it more relatable for people regardless of their position and their status. Yeah. So we will now start the Q&A. We welcome questions from the public. You can leave your questions in the comment section and hopefully it will be addressed by Dr. Minlip. So we have one question already, Doctor. And the question seeks to understand if the presentation that you have presented just now, right? You focus more on the Christian and also the Islamic tradition. And so we can say this is something that is about the Abrahamic expression of love. Yeah. So how can we then connect this idea of love beyond the Abrahamic expression? And how can people who do not belong to this faith can still appreciate and use these teachings into their life?
Good, thank you. Well, I mean, you know, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, is you have to begin somewhere. You got to, you know, you got to work with the material that is available to you in your own tradition first. And I think once those who, like I said, those who are committed to some kind of faith tradition, it seems to me it is within that first that faith tradition that one finds the ground, first the ground of what it might mean to love, or at least to have a care for the face of the other. When I mentioned Levinas and Ricoeur, Levinas comes from more or less a Jewish tradition, and Ricoeur comes from a Christian tradition. But when you read what they're talking about, is universal. They are not particularly interested in if you believe in God or not. They're using the, one might say, the vocabulary of their tradition to express some, it seems to me, across religion and even those who are in the secular world. What does it mean that the face of the other prohibit murder? That, it doesn't matter what you are. You know what murder is. You know the face of the other. in which way the face of the other, you are Hindu, Buddhist, you believe in God, you don't believe in God. In which way, when you look at, you meet somebody on the streets, that face is saying that you shall not kill. I don't think you need a religious tradition to understand that. And that shall not kill, what does it say to the other then? What care do you have for the other person that you meet? What kind of responsibility do you have? Because for living us, is this responsibility is asymmetrical. It's not concerned by the reciprocity. He said the face of the responsibility of the other is the other's business, but my business is the care that I have for that face, in which way I protect that face. And that, in my view, goes beyond what form of, religion or secular thing. So what I'm looking for is not, I understand this. I'm using a language that belongs to a particular religious tradition, but trying to reach out to that particular tradition.
Okay, that is very, I guess it explains that people of all backgrounds, they can still relate, even though the vocabulary might be something that is quite foreign to them. But if they choose to see beyond the specific terms, they would be able to understand the universality of these commands. And I guess this is also something that even people without any religious affiliation can understand and can apply into their life. And what your response, reminds me of this idea of how we cannot really control how people react towards us, but the only thing that we can control is our response. Exactly. And I think that is what the asymmetrical, non-preferential love is all about. All right, so thank you so much for that thoughtful answer. Another question here would be asking about, can you suggest some practical ways in which we can love those whom we simply find hard to love? If I can explain more about this question, is that how can we reconcile with what you said about the teachings of religion, about how we have to attempt to love as how God commands us to love, and love as how God shows his love towards us. But then there is also people who interpret words of God to the point that it seems like God is condoning hate, God is condoning violence, and so on. So in a more practical sense, how can we help each other to reverse what we have wrongly been taught about the others in a very general sense, and also in particular about people that we deem as pure evil, or people who have committed big, atrocious crimes, such as Hitler? So does Hitler deserve love?
All right, man, I don't know, but I mean,
that's radical.
I know. I'll do it in two ways. But I mean, to go back to the first part, how do we exercise some kind of love or some kind of understanding of those that we just find impossible in your life? Oh, those people who act in a certain way that is just not, something that you could approve of. All right, so Kierkegaard, in his understanding of this command to love, goes back to the parable of the Samaritan. But first of all, to say that I don't use the word good Samaritan for reason. I mean, it didn't not. I mean, a first century Palestinian Jew of that particular community will never use good and Samaritan, because those two people were really at each other's throat, right? So one of the lesson there is that we, in so many ways, it's not often mentioned, but you could say that what we see in the Samaritan is that what do you do with a person that culturally has been attached as your cultural enemy or religious enemy? The Samaritan and the Jew, I mean, they're all of the Jewish tradition, but then they were at each other's, they didn't. What do you do with somebody or some group of people that your very community have identified as the opposite. And look at how he acts. He acts in a very gentle manner vis-a-vis that person that culturally and religiously the enemy. And those who belong to that poor guy who was on the street, they came and they walked by. That's what so there is in this, in Kierkegaard understanding, that's what he believes, that because it's a command, right? It goes beyond the vicissitude of human life. It goes beyond all that our culture and our tradition has taught us to hate or to diminish, whatever you want to understand it, right? So in that sense, you could say, how do you overcome or at least exercise some kind of basic humanity vis-a-vis those who exercise unbelievable violence and force against you and your community? This question is not a question of tolerance or not. This goes beyond tolerance. And every religious community that I know of is still struggling with that question. There is no easy answer to it. And I think it comes down to, in which way, when you see the face of a human being, you say to yourself, there is something about that I share. What is it about that face that we share together? And in which way that can help at least peel away layer by layer all that our culture has taught us to hate or to condemn. Now, to the question of, can you love Adolf Hitler? Can you love, I mean, Hitler is not the worst case. I'm concerned. He's one of the worst cases, but there is a lot of worst cases. I think, well, that comes down to what, in which, I mean, I think this is a fundamental question for humanity, though. What do you do with our capacity to exercise almost uncontrollable evil? That's what it is at the end of the day, right? So Abraham Joshua liked to say that the problem with human being is that when they have power, they can't control it. God can control his power, but what we have power, we can't control it. And that Abraham Joshua thought that was our fundamental problem. And that is true. In so many ways, we have a little grain of power and we seem to be incapable of controlling it. Some do, some don't. So in the case of those who have exercised utmost evil against other people, the question remains, what you do? I think I'll leave that to God. I have an answer.
Which is true. We don't have to answer for that. It is not our role to judge them at the end of the day, right? But it brings me to the idea of, for criminals, do they deserve punishment or do they deserve rehabilitation for their actions? So is there still a chance for them to be redeemed, right? And so I guess, again, at the end of the day, the ultimate judgment is with God, and we follow God's steps, not in the judgment part, but in the love part, which is what we have shared. Yeah. All right. So we have another one question from the audience. It says, thank you, Dr. Minlip. Very refreshing to me. Question. Many Muslims I know regard the supreme values of Islam as power, justice, and mercy, inadvertently relegating love as secondary or even as a Christian value. Can you comment on that? Because like people say, Christian is the God of Christian is the loving God, and the God of Islam is the merciful God. So yes. Is there a reconciliation to that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't think there is an opposition to the two, right? Yep. Yeah, we don't have to oppose merciful to no. Yeah, I hear that a lot. I mean, I've been working in this business for a few years now, and it seems like Christians seems to have some monopoly on love. But when you read their tradition, we read the history of Christianity. I mean, pick up any book and just read the history of Christianity in the history of the world. And you wonder, what is that law we're talking about? I mean, you know, it's not like Christians have a monopoly on that. I mean, it might be that, you know, the text does speak to, you know, to that aspect, but I don't think so. I just think that in every tradition, I mean, it's quite interesting. Hussein Nasr said, and I think for some reason there is a truth to what he's saying. He said, among the Abrahamic tradition, there is no tradition that has produced more literature on law than Islam. If you take the Persian world alone and you pay attention to the great scholar of the Persian-speaking people writing about law, it's extraordinary. It is. I mean, it's unbelievable. The classical texts are full of how they try to understand this God. And the Quran doesn't say too much. There is very few lines in the Quran where God is identified as love. I mean, there are a few, but it's not too many. But their literature is extraordinary. So in that sense, I just think if you read the text, you realize that nobody has a monopoly on love. They all are trying to read their text and understand these phenomena called love. I mean, so in that sense, I don't think so. I think what matters is not so much to say that my text has a monopoly or not on love. It's trying to understand, what are we talking about? What is that phenomena? That's what Paul Fides was saying. If we believe, I think Paul is quite interesting here. It said, the underlying conviction is that to understand the phenomena of love is a discovery of the nature and the activity of God in the world. If that's your project, it doesn't matter you're reading the Quran, you're reading the Sunnah, you're reading the text, what text you're reading. If that is your project, I think you are on solid ground. There is enough material there for you to answer this question. If that is your underlying position, and that is my, more or less, that's the underlying position that we're making here, right? So we're trying to say that the text that we consider as a revealed text, we consider the path upon which we tread, right? Mm-hmm. That text has enough resources that answer this question. At least that's the way I see it.
Thank you. So we should not limit to literal interpretation or the literal terms that we can find in the text, right? And I think this is also something that as Muslims, we have to also understand that our tradition does not limit or restrict taking knowledge and taking inspiration from people, right? Yeah. And so if we go beyond our own religious texts to understand divine love and divine essence, I think we can get there. Okay. So we have one question to respond to the previous one where we talk about justice and judging evil people. The question asks, is it offensive to say we don't judge their action because like we are not the judge, right? God is the judge. But then how else do we accord justice to the millions of those who have died because of the evil deed they have done to them? Yeah. So how can we give justice for those who have been hurt by their action? Yeah.
Well, no, I think that you got to make a difference between a judgment that we can pronounce on people who have done extraordinary evil and our care for those who have paid the price. Like Mike and I would say, those who are catching hell. Those who are catching hell or paying the price, we have absolute duty to repair. We have every community. This is, I mean, that's what you were saying. Is it punishment of or rehabilitation? I think this is, as a communities, as societies have struggled, it's both. There is no way around it. It's when one takes over, like the United States, for example, is a clear example of this understanding that punishment, and then we have the largest incarceration in, in that part. But I think it's both. And then, I mean, there is always lessons to learn from communities that have gone through devastations, and to see how slowly, painstakingly, they reconstruct step by step the very thing that was destroyed. And I think that's what we got to invest on. It's not that, I'm not saying that, some people, I mean, that's why prison exists. That's also, it has a reason for punishment. There is a reason for punishment, but there is also this necessity to say, how do you return those who have done wrong back to the community? Because I believe that there is no such thing as, a lost cause. Human beings are always capable of returning to some kind of normal life. So that's the way I see it.
Okay, so it says that, to not judge is to be on the side of status quo. And if the status quo is evil, are we not complicit to it? So, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, it's quite clear that if we do not speak against evil or do something against it, we are complicit. We are allowing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's clear. If you see evil and you pass by, you just allow evil to continue. So if you see evil, you have to face it. You have to speak out. Otherwise, you are complicit. That's clear.
Yeah, this reminds me of a hadith by the Prophet, which says that you have to stop evil, even if it's just with your own heart. Absolutely. And so, yeah, you can stop it with your hand or with your speech or with your heart. And so I think we have to reflect upon individually, what can we do? We can't depend on the state to always be the server of justice, but as individual, what can we do and express our own sense of understanding in this topic? Okay, so there is another one question from the public, which asks, if love is the essence of God and the foundation of creation, why is there hell with the idea of eternal torture and punishment? People seem to just want to talk about, but why? As I said just now, God seems to condone, but then we have text where it says,
yes. I mean, that's a theological question that I'm not sure I have an answer to, but let's put it this way. This idea that in many religious traditions, that whatever we do here, or at least our action on earth in this life, has repercussion in the life to come. And our texts do speak about it. And the struggle or the conundrum here is to try to understand in which way the merciful God, the one who creates out of love, if or at least for those who understand that the very essence, like Halai said, love pertains the very essence of the divine, is in which way then we can reconcile that with the idea that there is a possibility of punishment. I just want to remember Ibn Arabi's solution. Ibn Arabi thinks that, heaven is eternal, right? Hell might be eternal, but the status of being in hell, that is not eternal, right? So Ibn Arabi is trying. But that's the question. That's the difficulty, right? I mean, what does it mean that this limited life of ours, right, can produce an eternal punishment? You see, so how you reconcile that? I mean, no matter what you do, how long you're gonna live, right? I mean, in which way? And then how you reconcile that with the merciful God? It's true. I mean, this is I think this is a theological discussion and conundrum that I don't think has a definitive answer, but at least we can try to see in which way those two concepts can be in our text, because our text, our foundational text does speak about it. Though you can't dismiss it, you have to try to figure out what's going on. That's why Ibn Arabi is trying to say that, you know, that those, for whatever reason, find themselves in that state that we call hell. That state cannot be eternal, right? At a certain point, there will be a, I don't know, call it, even then, they too will be in some kind of situation of not hell, as we understand it, right? Not hellfire.
Yeah, I do understand. In the Islamic tradition, there is this concept of the shafa'ah, where the prophet can help to like give some help to those people who've been sentenced to hell, you know, to bring them back, to redeem themselves. So yes, yeah. So this is something that I agree with you totally. We can't find a definitive answer until we face it. Only then we can understand and know truly, but that's too late for us to discuss then. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for that answer. Hope it does not confuse more people about it.
Yeah, but, I know. I hope.
But I think another thing for me to add is about the idea of not being too focused on this kind of things that we cannot agree upon. That we cannot find a definitive answer to, because it will just bring us to a position where we will be in total despair. So I think it's good to just push ourselves towards something that can bring more change, more progress to ourselves. That would make life much more bearable in that sense, yeah? Okay, we have another question, again, about the issue of punishment, which the question is, you mentioned that people should be rehabilitated and return to society, but a serial killer even? What do you say of capital punishment as found in the religious traditions or in some secular law?
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I guess all those questions are, the background of that is this idea of radical love. What does that mean in those extreme cases where human beings are capable of doing what they do? I mean, personally, I think, I mean, you know, there is enough work and enough research that has gone into the fact that whatever we associate with what does capital punishment produces in a society, right? Now, some people say, oh, yeah, it does this, it does that, it doesn't do this, does that. When you tally the whole thing and you read seriously about people who have studied this thing, I mean, United States is a clear case of it. Capital punishment really doesn't solve our problem. It doesn't. I mean, you know, it doesn't really solve our problem. It doesn't show clearly that when a society has a capital punishment, crime goes low or people don't kill each other, or that doesn't work. In principle, I want to believe, and then I do believe that we have, at this point in our, you know, in our society, we have better ways, you know, a more humane ways of dealing with the most difficult and, you know, impossible human being than kill them or whatever, you know. So I think life sentence or things like that are much more, you know, fit our society than just should kill them or whatever, you know. But anyway, that is a debated situation. But I lean toward those who believe that capital punishment is not the way to go. But what you do, there is, human beings are human beings, human societies are human societies. And I believe some people, for whatever reason, may never return to society. That you have to live with that. We have to live with the possibility that we can face. It can be your brother, it can be your sister, it can be your neighbor, whatever. There are circumstances. This is a human community where some people, for whatever reason, right, for whatever reason, should never return to the human community. Just, that's why we have life sentences, right?
Mhm,
Yeah.
yep.
But that has to be, once again, is the human justice. So we have to care for how it's distributed, in which way it is fair, in which way, in which way our system does not unduly punish some communities against others, so that justice is fair to everybody. In that sense, if you can do that, I think some people just, I don't think they can return to a community. I'm not a therapist, but it seems though that there are some cases that just, and those cases are not the majority of cases.
Yeah.
I want to, most people in general are capable of returning, right? So at least that's what I'll say.
Yeah, I do agree with you. And with the idea of, taking punishment as a general solution is definitely not something that can solve problems, is what you say, because situations are different. The reason why people commit atrocious acts are different. Some can be given rehabilitation, but others, out of many reasons, it's not an option anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So now we shall move to a new set of questions, which is a question of practical pedagogy. How can we cultivate this radical love for the other? Like, it's easy to say, but how do we actually create this radical love change in ourselves?
Yeah, how do we do this? And there is no, I think there is some about, what is a virtue? A virtue is a repeated act of, is a repeated act of one. It doesn't happen one day, or you don't do it one day and then it's gone or it comes back. No, then we have to be in this mode where we instruct ourselves, we cultivate, even acts of piety, right? Mm-hmm. Even acts of piety just don't happen, right? Those acts are cultivated, particularly whatever we value in our community, or whatever we value as this is trustworthy, praiseworthy act, doesn't happen and gone. Doesn't happen. It's not like God comes in and shut whatever into you. No, it's something that you perform day in and day out, and you perform day in and day out because you improve on it, right? So that's the way I would see it. Practically, to love is everyday work, and then falling back is all right. It's an occasion to learn how to do better. So it's not I don't think this to love is any more different than to do other things. It's true, though, that it's true, I have to say. That's what Ibn Arabi was saying, that it can numbs you, it can, love can do those things. That's true. That's true, right? I mean, but what I'm trying to say is that there are qualities, there are characteristics of what we call love that can be learned, that we acquire over time, that we build up over time. And those qualities, I think, are possible, and we can identify those. We can identify those and engage in those kind of things. And I think that's possible. That's the way I would answer the question. The question is not that, you are, even what we give as examples. I mean, we have people around us that we can identify, right? We can say this act here is an act of love. What makes you say that? And if you identify an act of love and you say to yourself, this is an act of love, how do you perform it yourself? Right? So there is a sense of discernment into those acts. It is also a sense of repeating choices, what kind of choices we make. so that our actions speak of what we mean by love, right?
Yes, yes. I think what we are actually talking about is how can we see love when we have already said so much about love. And I guess that starts with us individually, yeah, that we have to do it first and learn from ourselves, learn from God, and definitely learn from others. And I think it's not as hard if only we open our mind and heart and our eyes and the eyes of our heart to see the reality. Okay, so we now have a comment, and I would love to hear your thoughts about a comment by the audience. So the comment goes, in the Baha'i writings, the understanding of hell is a condition of the state of the soul, whether it is closer or farther from God. If one is far away from our beloved, that state of the soul is akin to hell. So it does not mean that God is punishing us, but depending on how we develop our innate spiritual qualities, it determines our state of closeness to God. Can you share
Yeah.
some thoughts?
Well, I mean, in so many ways, I think you see, like, just take the Abrahamic traditions, though, and think about it. And think about it 1 minute. When we speak of afterlife, right? If you look at the Jewish text, the Christian text, and the Islamic text, Islam is the most, what am I say, who has the most elaborate expression of afterlife. I mean, among in Jewish tradition, is in infancy. I mean, barely, it's not big. In Christianity, we have some hints, but I don't know, in that sense, Islam has the most elaborate. But what do you think about it seriously? I like to say, the comment is right. I like to say that, look at the opposite. What is heaven? What do we mean by heaven? What is the state of heaven? The best expression, and I think, you got that in Islam too, I think it's even Quranic, is the beatific vision, right? To be in presence of the divine. Now you can add, you can add whatever you want to add to it, but at least that's the essential part, right? Is to be. So the comment here is saying to be in the presence of the divine, or to be away from the presence of the divine, tells you what we mean by heaven and hell, right? The further you are for the divine, the beatific vision, you feel, we can call that hell. And the closer you are to the beatific vision, we can call that heaven, right? So in that sense, I agree. I agree that that state, is all vis-a-vis. And then, we're talking about human language now. What do you mean by proximity to the divine? Or close, what does that mean? In that, you see, we're borrowing all those language that breaks down once we find ourselves before, So, but I agree that if you can use the metaphor of proximity or away from the divine, that is a better way, in my view, of trying to unfold or express what we mean by hell or heaven. That I agree. Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you for your comment on that comment. I think yes, distance, proximity is something that we cannot really explain, especially with the divine. Yeah. Okay, we have another one question about Eastern tradition. Now, the question is, will you consider the Eastern tradition, such as the idea of karuna or compassion or the desire to remove pain and suffering, as something that complements the idea of love in the Abrahamic faith? So karuna is in the Buddhist tradition, yeah. So do you think that it is something that we can put together, complement?
Yeah, but that means compassion? Karuna?
Karuna, over here it says compassion. Yes, desire to remove.
Yeah, that's well, I mean, why not? It's all about, at least in my view, what does your text provide for you? Where, which sources do you go to live, at least to act lovingly? If it's compassion, why not?
Yeah.
If it's love in the Christian tradition, why not? If it's mercy, why
Mhm.
not? Right. So I don't think we should fight over that. What we should concentrate on, in which way those elements or those words that are available to your text produces the kind of act that your community, yourself, or people around you will identify as this is a loving act, right? In
Yeah.
which way those, if you are merciful, why not? If you know what I mean. So I
Yeah.
don't think, like, what I'm interested in which way you go to your text, and your text gives you what allows you to act lovingly. As
Mhm.
far as you do that, I don't think I have a, if your Christian text allows you to act lovingly vis-a-vis the face of the other, I'm all right with you. So I think that's really what I'm more interested in.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I do agree with you. It's a matter of terms, as you said just now about vocabulary, right? That is more familiar to that religious tradition. And we should go beyond these terms and understand the essence of it. We have another comment that touches on the concept of justice. So the comment goes, the concept of justice is merely about reward and punishment. Rather, it is ensuring that conditions and opportunities are afforded to everyone to be able to develop and attain the high noble station that God has created everyone of us for. Justice and mercy goes together. We often forget to examine how societal systems have resulted in people committing crimes. How can we make system more just and equitable? For heinous crimes, it is up to societal institutions to decide the punishment, ensuring dignity of the person and also safety of the general public. Yeah.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on that, Doctor?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, one of the key problem that nation states, it doesn't matter where really you find yourself, are facing in terms of the exercise of justice, um, is what I would call distribution of wealth and power, right?
Mhm.
In which way, if our communities, our societies govern itself in such a way that access to wealth and power is, what I'm going to say is that we minimize the gap, the way we distribute that, well, minimizing the injustice in the way that, we seem, I mean, I don't think there is any society that I know of capable of it. I mean, we live
Yep.
in a world where, and that has a direct impact in what we call justice. You
Mm.
you cannot distribute wealth and power in such a way that entire communities or some communities are completely excluded of it, or have hard time historically to have access to wealth and power, and
Yep.
exercise justice as if everybody was on the same level.
Yeah.
That is not justice,
Mhm.
right? So justice start, and maybe love start, compassion start with how we make sure distribution and wealth and power is fair.
Mm.
If we can do that, we can exercise justice, a punishment, a rehabilitation, in very, yeah. But I think if at the basic understanding of how a society works has to do with how we allow, or at least we organize ourselves in such a way that we minimize the inequality of, we minimize how access to wealth and power is distributed unequally. If you can do that, then our justice will have a greater uh, resonance. It will shine better.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, that I agree. I agree that that's very important. I don't know if I missed anything, but that I was gonna agree with that part, that we do need to exercise. And then that you see that everywhere in every community that I live, they usually say, "Oh, the poor commits crime." But while the poor don't commit crime, they just happen to be trying to survive.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, yes.
you know.
It's true. It's so true how people would highlight all the flaws of the poor and just put a blind eye to whatever that the people in power are doing when it is much more worse and bring much more impact to the country, right? Yeah, I think this is what you say. Everyone struggles with this, and I guess as people of religious faith and tradition, or even people without any affiliation to any religious tradition, it is very important for us to find, what are the essence that really help us to behave. At the end of the day, it's about behavior. It's about our individual behavior, right? And how we behave towards others. Another person says that, yeah, he agree with that comment just now, because he felt that we miss the point in such discussion on root causes, conditions, and opportunities. Because I think one of the reasons why this kind of in-depth conversation or discussion is not widely available is because people are lazy to, go deeper, because it will just create more question and more confusion in the beginning, but there will always be solution. But sometimes is the solution is what people would welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's sometimes what is good is good for us, but is it what we want? Yeah, I'm reminded of a verse from the Quran that says, sometimes you don't want things, you don't want, you don't like it, but that is good for you. So now the question is to us then, do we want it if it is presented to us? Okay, so let me see if there is another question. Yeah, there is another question. So the question goes, can you love evil, power, and exploitation? Is that love? Or love has a dual aspect of love for the good or love for destruction?
Well, I think it's the Buddhists who say that love and hatred is the same energy. It just depends on which direction it goes, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's the same thing. So, well, morally speaking, can you love evil? Can you love destruction? I would say that you will do, as a human being, engage in evil and destruction, right? And at times, it will seem that there is some kind of enjoyment in destroying, right? It will seem, at least the phenomenon of hatred or the phenomenon of destruction or the phenomenon, like people who, you might, from outside, from just the phenomenon of it, just looking at the phenomenon of killing somebody or whatever, when you look at it, it might seem like there is enjoyment, but I have to push against it and say, how would that be? I don't know. It might be possible, but I will think that at a certain point, that's why in so many ways we could say that we read the history of humanity. We have gone to wars after wars, but at a certain point we stop. There is some about destruction that cannot be permanent, right? There is some about destruction that cannot be permanent. There's something about hatred that cannot be permanent. It seems to me, but it's some about loving that can be permanent.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my inclination. I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but I'm just thinking aloud here, because in which way destruction and evil can be a permanent state of a human being, right?
Yes.
So that's so I'm thinking, no, I don't think that is. I mean, if you have a committed faith, you want to push against that, right?
Yeah.
At least, I mean, I do understand that if you read the history of humanity, in the name of everything, in the name of God, in the name of nation, in the name of flag, in the name of whatever, people have done horrendous things. But in which way they have enjoyed it, or in which way that particular way of destroying yourself or the other right? In which way that can be, I don't know. I'm not sure that is possible.
That is love or not. This how it reminds me of the question of, how we express love to the divine. Is it a love of desire and fulfillment, or is it love of total altruistic love, unconditional love? And so if we look at this concept of unconditional love, then I don't think the love for evil can be something that is altruistic. Like, there's no sense of you are doing it just for evil. There must be something. Yeah. So this is a question for us to really ponder upon and really think. And even as our individual self, when we come across things like evil and bad habits and all not, right? So how do we fight against it, even if we find some fulfillment in them? Yeah. Okay. We have, I think this would be the last comment, but it's more of a comment and also a question. So the comment goes, one of the most important expression of love today, today's broken world, is love for the refugees who are the contemporary manifestation of that Samaritan. Do you think we can do more with regards to the refugee crisis? What can we do?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of them. Tariq Ali said, anytime you go to war, expect refugees. Anytime somebody start a war somewhere, we got to expect, you got to be ready. If you bank, you sign a check to go to war, sign a check for refugees. That's the way it works. So I mean, in that sense, yes, in that sense, I mean, what can we say? But yeah, I think though that's one of those. And the refugee, I mean, today, my friend, I don't know, this guy said that there are billions of people, right? Who there is about 7 billion of us on Earth, right? Around a little more than 7 billion or whatever it is. About half of that population somehow are, if they are now moving from one place to find find something, livable, let's say are catching hell, right? And then catching hell for whatever reason, economical reason, power, So they are somehow refugees, put it that way. They are people who are displaced or not displaced, but yet live in the condition of a refugee, right? That's what we mean, That's what we're talking about. The distribution of wealth and power. That's another one. That's another way of talking about refugees. That's what it is, right? So, and another thing, we as a society have a serious thinking to do, and trying to figure out in which way we can do better in terms of going to the sources. Why the refugees? It's not so much when you see them coming, it's why they left home. Right? It's quite left home. That's what Tariq Ali was saying. If you go to war, sign a check to go to war and sign another check for refugees that you will welcome. So go to the sources. Why are they on the street? Why are they traveling from one country to another country? Right? I mean, we got this, the United States is in the center of it because, from the southern border of the United States, you got all the people immigrant coming, and then it's always this, is always that, But the problem is not there. The Haitian won't leave Haiti if they can live there. I mean, people think that you can travel for leisure, but when you have to leave your place and wander elsewhere, it's never a joy, never. So I think the refugees are just the symptoms of a deep, deep problem that nation states are still incapable of solving. I think that's what it is. I mean, they just show that we have a long way to go.
Yeah, I understand your point, and I do agree with it. I think there also the root is about not seeing people as people deserving of respect, dignity, and all of these rights. They only see people or with those who they agree with. And so when they say, oh, I agree to this war, but I don't agree to whatever happening over there because they are not of my concern, right? So this is what I guess this radical love is trying to change. Instead of seeing others as incapable of giving any respect, we are trying to use this concept of love to see people as who they are. And in a way to build bridges, even though we may not know them personally, but at least when we see them in the face of the other, we see a human being deserving of respect. Okay, one last question, Doctor. We have one last question. It says, a most insightful point that love and hatred constitute the same energy, but turn in different directions. During these turbulent times, how can we best transform base impulses of hatred or destruction into the kind of radical love that the world needs today?
Well, we should ask Imran to answer that question.
His voice.
Well, how do we? I mean, I think yes. I think this is really the question that we all have to take with us at the end of this conversation. Is how do we channel the best in us, particularly when we are almost permanently, not permanently, at least, you know, since COVID and all that, we are death dealing situations, right? Yeah. How do we channel the best in us when we are dealing with death dealing situations? I mean, how do we do that? Where do we find those? When do you find the energy? You know, where do we find the inspiration? Where do we find the strength? You know, to channel the best in us. I think that's what I could say. And then is around us. We know act of love. We know act of mercy. We know act of compassion. That's no, we do. So, like you said, those are places where we need to ponder and see how we can master and, you know, channel those so that we can be an instrument for that kind of situation. I think that's all I could say. And I do see that is not an easy task. It's not an easy task, but that's all I can say. I don't have an answer.
Yeah, it's like you are drowning and you still want to save people who are also drowning. Yeah. I guess this can only be answered as we experience life and as we experience life with the other. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Minlip, for such a very interactive, insightful discussion. I hope that the audience also felt the same way. And if there is any takeaway that I can take, you know, from this whole discussion is about do not focus on the terms, do not focus on the things that can separate or can make things more confusing, but rather find the essence between each traditions and find if it speaks to us. And when it speaks to us, try to emulate it into action. Try to make it into action and not just, you know, leave it into words. So there is still a lot of things that we need to do as individual and collectively as society. But it is a hopeful thing because we have these concepts in our tradition, and hopefully it will be beneficial to those who have heard our discussion today. Okay, with that, thank you everyone. Have a good night and see you all in the next session that we have in the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.